Okay. Wow.
It's been 7 seconds.
It's been 7 seconds since we started the video. All right. Y'all can see how good I can sing.
Yep.
It's obvious from that.
It's been 1 week since I watched the show.
Well,
Not gonna finish that line.
ah,
Gotta love
Yeah.
Jerry Springer. He's the best.
no. But Weird Al is definitely.
Weird Al singing about Jerry Springer now. That's just mixed feelings in a nutshell.
Oh, which is kind of the way people are feeling today because it's Inauguration Day. And a lot of people are very excited because of the new president that we have. They voted for him. They think he's great. They think he's going to do great. And they're expecting awesome things in the next 4 years.
And a lot of people aren't.
Yeah, they kind of have different feelings. They didn't want the president that we had to leave. So there's a lot of mixed feelings. So when someone new starts ruling a country, it's not really fair to say our president rules the country because he's not a king, but kind of all we have in the Bible for the most part is kings who ruled the country, but to be leading our country, so to speak. Let's think
He's like
about
the face of the nation.
Yeah. Wow, we have had some very interesting faces of our nation.
We have. Have you seen Abraham Lincoln's?
That's why he kept that beard. It covered up a lot of that.
Yeah.
Beards cover a multitude of skin sins, I think is what they say. Something like that. Just like cheese covers a multitude of cooking sins.
And chocolate, depending on, whether you're known for sweet or savory.
But love covers a multitude of real sins. So, interesting that this one came up. This is our next one in 1 Kings. 1 Kings 3, verses 6 through 9. It's weird sometimes when you're just going through things in order and you weren't really planning it, but then just, there it is. Solomon is becoming king. And so
Solomon for president.
Yeah.
Solomon 2024.
And Solomon was, there were a lot of things about Solomon that weren't so great.
Yeah. Especially by the end of his life. You look at it and you're just like,
this guy went the wrong direction. And that's kind of the way a lot of people feel about a lot of the presidents we've had. That, there were some things about them that just weren't so great.
Yeah.
But here in 1 Kings chapter 3, starting in verse 6 and through verse 9, Solomon is speaking to God, praying to God, and he says, "You have shown great and steadfast love to your servant David, my father, because he walked before you in faithfulness, in righteousness, and in uprightness of heart toward you. And you have kept it from him, you have kept for him, for and from are two different words. You have kept for him this
quite
great...
different in this situation
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. Well, yeah, in meaning. In letters, there's just a little bits of difference, but in meaning, very different. You have kept for him this great and steadfast love, and have given him a son to sit on his throne this day. And now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of David my father. Although I am but a little child, I do not know how to go out or come in. And your servant is in the midst of your people whom you have chosen, a great people, too many to be numbered or counted for multitude. Give your servant, therefore, an understanding mind," some translations say heart there, "to govern your people, that I may discern between good and evil, for who is able to govern this your great people?" And verse 10 says, "It pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked for this."
So, we're about halfway through, so I think it's a good spot to break.
Well, that's the end of the prayer.
Yeah.
The rest is kind of God's answers.
So, a couple things we want to see here. First of all, at this point, Solomon's on the right track because obviously he's going to God about whatever it is. At the very initial part of this, it doesn't matter that he's praying for wisdom. It doesn't matter what's happening. He's going to God.
Yeah.
That's the first step, and that's very important. And we need to realize that is especially important, I would say, for a leader.
Yeah.
One
and
of
something that we need to pray that our leaders do.
Mhm.
All of our leaders.
One of the problems that I have personally with basically all of the leaders in any country, really, not just our president, is that because of the way politics and politicians work, especially in this country, since being a Christian is generally considered a good thing, a lot of them will act kind of like Christians and be like, oh yeah, here's my favorite Bible verse. Oh, Jesus, yeah, and oh, prayer. Let's set a national day of prayer for this because bad things are happening. But just because they're doing that doesn't mean that they're actually devoted to God in
Or
any
that they're
way.
living it in their daily life. Yeah.
In
that's
this,
a big part of it.
Solomon starts this prayer in private. No one's
Well,
going
this
to
is
hear
actually,
him.
I mean, he's actually in a dream with God at this
Yeah.
point.
But anyway,
So
point being, no one
he's not bragging to
ever,
everybody else.
yeah, he's not putting on a show for
Yeah.
everybody else. This is just him and God. And now, because of the way our perceptions of people work, we're never going to be able to have that with a politician. You're never going to be able to be like, you know what? That was a private prayer that he just did. That was
Yeah, we
not
can't-
him putting on a show.
We can't see into their hearts so many times
Mhm.
and see privately what they're thinking and
Yes.
feeling toward God.
So just on this first step, that's kind of difficult because even if a politician does do a prayer, even if they do say, you know, I'm a Christian and bad things are happening, we need to stand together, believe in Jesus, and let's set a national day of prayer for today. Does that even mean anything? It may not. It's hard to tell. But we can see that Solomon here is on the right track because he is going to God in prayer and he's not doing it as a show.
And in addition to him going to the right person, and doing, he's asking for the right thing.
That was my next point.
Yeah, God has given him the choice. He's like, God said, I'm going to set you on the throne of David, your father. You're going to be the king, and so I'm going to bless you. What do you want?
Mm-hmm.
And Solomon could have gone all sorts of different directions with what he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
But he asks for the right thing. He asks for this wisdom. He asks for an understanding mind or an understanding heart to be able to be better at governing God's people, to be better at shepherding them and leading them closer to God.
And as you, the viewer, let me ask you a question real quick. Well, bit of backstory, real short. Our country is basically set up so that we, the people, are in essence the deciding body, the rulers, if you will, of this nation. We're the ones who choose the face of the country, the lawmakers, the judges. It's up to us. So in essence, we're the rulers. Now, here comes my question. When was the last time you, as a Republican or a Democrat, could look at someone from the opposite side, talk with someone from the opposite side with an understanding heart, and sit down and genuinely say, you know what? You might be right about that, even though it goes against so many things you've believed in. When was the last time you were able to do that?
Or
Now-
even considered it.
Yeah.
Or just even thought about it.
Now,
Instead of just, wait, no, I got to say my part. You got to say, give me quiet. I got to say what I think.
if you have been able to do that, great, amazing. I dare say that you're probably on the right track when it comes to politics and maybe life in general. I don't know if I want to push that far. But I feel like that's something that we really need to do a better job of.
Understanding each other, understanding the other side's reasonings and thoughts is important.
And giving the benefit of the doubt sometimes, too. I can't tell you how many conversations would have gone completely terrible, would have wrecked friendships if I or someone on the other side of the conversation with me hadn't given the other person the benefit of the doubt and was something, well, maybe you didn't quite mean that, and then ask a follow-up
Maybe I
question.
misunderstood what you were saying.
Hang on. Were you saying this? Do you believe this? Is this what you actually think? Oh, no, I'm sorry. Or, yeah, kind of, but more along these lines, so that you can clarify and actually understand each other instead of, well, you think this, well, that's stupid. Well, no, I never actually believed that in the first place. You've misunderstood me.
And that's the thing. We have a tendency to set up what in logic is called a straw man
Mm-hmm.
and argue against that straw man instead of actually talking with and arguing over the actual things that the other side may be saying about things.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to be careful of that.
Mm-hmm.
My thing about this too is, if you were praying for President Trump during his 4 years, then you need to keep praying for President Biden now during his 4 years and pray for him to have some wisdom, to have an understanding heart, to walk before God in faithfulness and righteousness and uprightness of heart.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know some will say, well, he'd never do that. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. Others on the other side, and 4 years ago, I could have done this same thing if we'd have been doing it then, and said the same thing to a lot of people about President Trump. Pray for him. Now his time is up, and some people never prayed for him, and then all of a sudden they'll think that Biden is the greatest thing since sliced bread and be praying for him all the time. Other people never prayed for Obama, but then when Trump became president, they were praying for him all the time. And we need to quit glorifying our politicians, leaders, presidents, anybody else. Be glorifying God, but be praying for them. The Bible tells us as Christians that we are to be praying for our leaders. Now, whether that's leaders in the home, in the church, local leaders, state leaders, or national leaders, we need to be praying. And one of the things that we can certainly pray for them is wisdom. There are a lot of difficult decisions that I know it's easy for us to sit back. Well, if the president ought to do this or that or the other thing. You're not the president. And if you were, you'd find out real quick it's not nearly as easy as that. If all the armchair quarterbacks were half as good as they thought they were, they'd be NFL players. And if all of the armchair politicians were half as good as they think they are, they'd all been president by now. They're not, and we're not, and we don't know everything that's going into these things.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't things that are right and wrong. And when there are things that are right, regardless of who the president is, we need to respect that this is right. They made the right choice here. This is good. This is what God wants. And when they do wrong, then we need to say, no, that is wrong. It doesn't matter whether the president's on my side or their side or if they do wrong, they do wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And we have this tendency to think, well, my side never does anything wrong, and the other side always does everything wrong and never does anything right. I know. It's kind of weird because I know Solomon, there was, you realize there was another king that set up his place as king the same time Solomon did.
Kind of fitting, huh?
Yeah, it's kind of, it didn't go so well for him though. I mean,
No.
He wound up getting caught and Solomon he's like, I'll let you live, just, don't try anything again, don't do anything to try to overthrow my kingdom, that didn't work out so well, and he wound up being executed because he couldn't leave well enough alone.
One of the things that I think is really interesting about understanding the opposite side is I think on the whole, Republicans would say that they're for capitalism, and Democrats, I think maybe more the mainstream Democrat
I think
would say
they would stay there for capitalism too, just more, part of moral capitalism.
mm-hmm.
Don't go to extremes, I guess would probably be the way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, don't.
But a fair amount of Democrats would also say, especially the up-and-coming ones, my generation, would say socialism. Yeah. And both sides, obviously, absolutely abhorrent to the idea of the other side. The younger Democrats absolutely hating the concept of capitalism. Republicans hating the concept of socialism. I was in a formal debate a while back where I had to present proof for why socialism, I was on the negative side for why capitalism is the best format for society.
So you were arguing that it was not the best format. Is
And
that right?
yes,
Yeah,
and
okay.
I was arguing in essence, well, I could have chosen other different formats, but I decided, you know what? Let's go all the way to the other extreme, basically. Let's go for socialism. So I'm going to argue for socialism and say that it is better than capitalism, and I'm going to give my proofs in this debate, even though that's not what I believe, because I was very strongly for a capitalistic society at that point. After the debate was over, I was looking at all the proofs that had been presented, and I realized it has to be both. If you have a society that is based on entire capitalism at the fundamental roots of capitalistic society, economy, everything, it's going to fall apart eventually without very much time. I mean, it may last for a while, it may do fairly well, but it's going to fall apart. Same thing for a purely socialistic society. It's going to fall apart. You need key elements from capitalism and socialism mixed together in order to make a long lasting, well functioning society. And if you think about it, that's what we have in America.
That's what we've had for
That's
a long time.
That's what we've had for an incredibly long time.
We've had interesting times in our country. There was, at one point in our country, the government was in such bad shape that the business owners who had a lot of wealth had to bail them out.
Multiple times,
and
especially around Great Depression era,
and
I believe.
and before that. And then after the Great Depression, where the government starts bailing the people out, and then we've had other times where the government's bailed out businesses and things that would have failed otherwise. So it's interesting, a little bit of both of those ideas working together.
But you think about that concept of opposite ends of the spectrum, capitalism and socialism, having to work together in order for a strong society to be built. You think about Republicans and Democrats at opposite ends of the spectrum having to understand each other and work together for a strong, long-lasting society to be built.
Yeah.
Now you think about what we're going through currently. We have Republicans and we have Democrats not willing to understand each other, hating each other, viewing each side's policies as stupid, ignorant, weak, worthless, whatever adjective you want to use.
And viewing each other as the enemy.
Exactly.
And forgetting that the real enemy always is Satan. And he's trying to divide us, trying to get... Now, again, and on something, it still doesn't mean that there's not a right and a wrong answer on these things. There is. But sometimes we are so blinded by one right thing that we miss the 5 wrong things that are surrounding it. Or we're so blinded by the one wrong thing that we miss the 5 right things surrounding it.
I'm always fascinated by the Chinese Taoist concept of yin and yang, of how you have 2 parts that are almost complete opposites, but together they make a perfect circle.
Yeah. And there's a little bit of one in each of the other.
But the thing is, if they aren't willing to come together as that perfect circle, then you just have 2 useless shards. And they got to work together. Otherwise, you're not going to have anything even remotely useful. And in order for that coming together to happen, we have the prayer that we've been looking at with Solomon, where there has to be wisdom, there has to be the willingness to understand, and then people have to actually put in the time and the effort and the unpleasantness that comes from some disagreement and attempting to understand and reconcile differences.
And one of the things that we notice here, in order to understand, we have to first understand that we don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
If we already think we know, then we're not going to learn. And Solomon says here in his prayer, he says, although I am but a little child. Now, he was not a little child.
No.
Now, you know, there were some kings that were 7, 8,
What was he,
12
like,
years old.
20s?
But he was already in his 20s by the time. But he still feels like there's so much he doesn't know. I'm but a little child. I don't know how to go in or come out, or come in or go out. He said, your servant's in the midst of all your people, and I just don't know how to govern them. I need an understanding mind to govern them.
Mm-hmm.
I need to be able to discern between good and evil.
He
Need to
knew
be able to,
that he didn't understand.
right, and knew that he needed
And that was
to.
the first step.
Yeah. And unfortunately, sometimes that's with our politicians
Mm-hmm.
and with their fans, us, as you know, we're on one
Party
side
members.
of this or the other. We forget too that sometimes we don't understand everything.
So, for example, I heard a great story about this a while back. Kyle Butt, a member of the Church of Christ, was in a debate with an atheist. And the atheist was like, well, you Christians believe da 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 da. And he was just like, I don't believe that. I've never believed that. And the atheist was like, well, you Christians believe da 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 da. Time after time after time. I don't know how many times it happened, but multiple times in the debate, he said that with various different things that Christians believed. And every single time, Kyle Butt was like, I've never believed that. I can tell you completely and honestly that as a Christian, I have never believed that.
Yeah.
He had set up these ideas of what a Christian was in his mind, the atheist had, and he thought that Christians had to fit these ideas, that they followed these
That every one
philosophies,
of
these
them was gonna fit that.
concepts. And then when he was actually talking with one, in a debate with one, he found out really quickly that no, you don't know Christians as well as you think you do. How often does the same thing happen in politics, where a Republican or a Democrat has an idea of what the other side is like, in effect what everyone on the other side is like?
Yeah. Well, you're this party. You must believe this, this, and this.
Mhm.
And yet, no one of us ever agrees 100% with anybody else about everything.
Exactly. I agree with my dad here about a lot of things, but there have been plenty of but there have been plenty of things where he and I start talking and he's like, hang on, you don't agree with that? And I'm like, no,
He's
I don't
wrong
think so."
sometimes. What can I
Yeah.
say?
Yeah, he is too.
Never. I'm never wrong. I'm always right.
But yeah.
Didn't you
See,
hear the poem?
and see, this is part of the problem.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
never
he's
wrong.
wrong.
I'm always right.
No.
That's
No, I'm never wrong. I'm always right.
I was speaking as you.
Oh, okay.
As Paul says, I'm
get that
speaking
straight.
as the foolish people speak. But if you always think that you are on the right side, always right,
There's no room for growth if you're perfect.
exactly.
And all of us have room for growth.
And if
And
you
that means
think
we're
you're
not
perfect, then you're just going to wind up stuck in the same spot for your entire life until you realize you're not.
Yeah.
And that, if you think you're perfect, that's a really, really difficult concept for you to grasp.
And if we will work together and understand each other, and obviously even when we do understand, sometimes we're going to get to the understanding. Oh wait, so these are yes, that's exactly okay. Well, I still disagree with you.
Yes, and that's fine. You are completely, totally, absolutely welcome to disagree with someone as long as you understand them. But if you think you understand them and you haven't gotten confirmation from them that you understand them, it's called an Iron Man argument, where you're paying attention to the other person's arguments and then you rephrase their arguments in a way that is better than what they have been able to say. So you say their argument in a way that makes them say, yes, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. Thank you.
And then you can destroy it.
And Once you are able to do the Iron Man argument, then you have successfully understood what they actually believe. And from that point, you can say, huh, yeah, you are right. Or, no, I don't believe you. Here's why.
Here's where the mistake is in your thinking.
Yeah.
And the thing is, obviously, to be successful in this country, you have to know your opponent's arguments better than they do themselves.
Yes.
And that's an important part. So what's the point? Why would we want to be understanding? Why would we want the understanding heart? Why do we want our political leaders to have these understanding hearts like Solomon prays for? Well, because of the blessings that it's going to bring.
Mm-hmm. So earlier we talked about all of these things that Solomon could have prayed for. He had the option to ask God for anything.
Yeah.
And we talked about how broad that option was.
But God was glad that he asked for the understanding heart.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, in verse 11, it tells us, because you've asked this and you've not asked for yourself for long life or riches or for the life of your enemies.
To win in combat.
Right. But have asked for yourself understanding to discern what is right. Behold, I now will do according to your word. I will give you a wise and discerning mind, so that none like you has been before you, and none like you shall arise after you. I give you also what you have not asked, riches and honor, so that no other king shall compare with you all your days. And if you will walk in my ways, keeping my statutes and my commandments as your father David walked, then I will lengthen your days.
Mm-hmm.
And so God offers to give him these promises, even to give him these other blessings. Throughout the book of Proverbs, Solomon, in recording the Proverbs, talks about how wisdom brings riches and honor with it.
Mm-hmm.
It has so many other blessings that come from understanding.
Wisdom's a package deal.
Yeah. It gives so many bonuses to you. And so it's so important for us. And even though, and when we say, well, I already know I'm not going to, well, give it a try again. You have two options here. One, when you engage someone else and try to understand them, you may also be able to help them understand you.
Mm-hmm. And that's very important.
You may be able to persuade them, and certainly you'll have a much better chance of persuading them than sticking your finger in their face and going, well, you're wrong, this is stupid, you're dumb, and you. Nobody's ever been persuaded that way.
Yeah.
We have to reason together about these things and understand each other if we're going to start to actually be able to persuade each other to come to a different conclusion than what we've had prior in our life.
And one of the other things, you brought up Proverbs and how Solomon talks about all of the blessings that wisdom brings with it. One of the other things Solomon talks about in Proverbs is where wisdom comes from. And I feel like we haven't emphasized or talked about that at all enough in this episode. Wisdom comes from God. True wisdom comes from God.
Yeah, there's a worldly wisdom that's not from God. And James talks about the difference in those two wisdoms.
Worldly wisdom is along the lines of the prideful, oh, I already know what you're going to say before you're going to say
I'm
it.
smarter
I'm
than you.
smarter than you. I already know it.
I got it
That's what
figured
we're
out.
trying to fight. And if you want to fight that, you got to be humble. You got to admit, you know what? Maybe I am wrong. Maybe I'm not actually the smartest person in the room. Maybe someone else has something that could actually be important.
And James also tells us that God will give us wisdom if we ask for it.
Mm-hmm. And Solomon asked for it.
Solomon
And God
asked, got
straight
it.
up, God promises him that he's going to be the wisest person that has ever and will ever live.
Yeah.
And he still messed up.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is that, yes, understanding is important, wisdom is important,
But it's no good if you don't use it.
and it will not solve all of your issues if you don't turn away from them. And that was Solomon's problem. He just could not. He should have known better, but he didn't. We don't always use the wisdom that we have.
That's one of the things Dad talks about this one fairly often. If somebody gives you a gift and it's like wrapped up in the box and whatever, and you just set it on the shelf, never open it, or even if you do open it, let's say it's a set of silverware. If you never actually use the silverware, has the gift done any good for you? No, of course it hasn't. Even
Not
if you
until you hawk it and get the money back.
That's fair.
Yeah.
But even if you want wisdom, you ask God for wisdom,
And he gives you wisdom.
and He gives you wisdom. You've opened the present. You know you have the silverware. If you don't actually use your wisdom in as many situations as possible every single day, it's not going to help you.
Yeah, and the fact of the matter is that our wisdom often goes unused.
Yes.
God has given us all the things that we need for life and godliness, he tells us. Even in the scriptures, he's given us his will, his law, his rules for wise living even.
Mm-hmm.
And so many times we either don't read it and study it and learn from it,
Mm-hmm.
or, we know a few verses, but we don't actually put them to practice in our life.
You know how when you're listening to a sermon and you get to the end and there's that like the wrapping up sound, like the sermon's going to be over in like 3 to 5 minutes, if that. That was what I just heard. And I was about ready to stand up and offer the invitation.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, just because the sound, like every single time I hear that sound, I'm like, all right, now we stand and sing.
You know that sound. Yeah, from me anyway. You've heard enough of my sermons.
It's a very familiar sound, yes.
Well, since we've gone over 30 minutes, I thought it was an appropriate time.
It works.
But this, we're not having our Wednesday night Bible study, so this is the appropriate opportunity.
We need
for
to
us
move this
consider
class to Sundays because I have my own class on Wednesdays. And if we have this class on Sundays, then I could, we could do it in the auditorium together.
Well, there you
We
go.
need to do that at some point.
Yeah.
It's going to be going on long enough.
Yeah.
I mean, we're only in First
First
Kings.
King, just started
Kings?
First Kings, yeah. First Kings right here.
We got a ways
Which is
to go.
actually Third Kings. Did you know that?
Yeah, I did know that.
Some Bibles they call First and Second Samuel, First and Second Kings, and then what we have is First and Second Kings is Third and Fourth Kings.
But Chronicles is
Chronicles
its
is
own
still Chronicles.
That said, there are like 4 more books of Chronicles that we don't
at least
have.
there's the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't know how many. Those are completely lost.
But
so we have no idea what.
For some
is
reason,
in
I
them.
thought there was another 2 books of the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think the Chronicles of Judah is all there.
Anyway,
I mean, there were probably some other writings that they had
yeah.
that were just
So
different,
we've had a pretty long, in-depth discussion on.
and chances are,
How dare you interrupt me?
I do it all the time.
You did.
Chances are you didn't agree with everything we said.
Yeah, and that's okay, as long as you understood it.
But think about it.
Yeah.
Consider the possibility of it at least. You may come down and say, those guys are just dumb. Okay. You may say, I really do need to do a better job of trying to understand other people's arguments and why they believe what they believe. And we'd be happy with that too.
Yeah, and I dare say, you can never do a good enough job of understanding people.
Yeah, I think it would be hard. I mean, only God
Yeah.
truly understands us. We often don't even understand ourselves.
Yes.
Sometimes we don't even understand our own arguments for why we believe what we believe.
Which is
Much less somebody
why
else's.
the Iron Man argument is so impressive to people. Is because I can truly understand you and your arguments on this issue better than you can.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you should listen to me.
Maybe.
And that is why if you can listen and understand and use wisdom and perfect your Iron Man argument.
And another
That's great.
thing that Jesus often did is argue with someone by asking them a question.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of saying, well, this, and this, and you're wrong because of this. Ask them the question.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about this topic?
Yeah. Well, or things like Jesus said, of how much more value is a man than a sheep?
Mm-hmm.
Or have you read where Moses said this? What do you think about that?
Mm-hmm.
What about David? You know, the David's son is the Messiah. How's that supposed to? You know, and he asked them questions that they really, in order to answer his questions, they had to really
think about their own
examine what they
beliefs.
really believed and why they believed what they believed.
And see, one of the other things about arguing, debating, at the beginning of talking with someone, having a debate in politics, religion, whatever it is, at the beginning, your only job is to understand them and their position. Every question you ask, every point you pull up, needs to be designed so that you can understand them better. If you run into it at
Now,
the
in an actual debate, a
You
lot
are-
of that is already established before the
Yes.
debate begins because they've
Yes.
both already written, I affirm this statement or I negate this statement as it's written.
Yes.
And so you already have that basis
Yes.
before you start.
But
Otherwise,
on
it'd
just
be
like-
a lot longer.
on a conversational debate with someone,
Yeah, just a discussion.
if you run into it trying to argue instead of trying to understand, you're just going to cause problems. You understand the person, and then you don't argue, you persuade. And if you can both understand each other and then both start persuading each other,
Who
then-
knows where you might wind up by the end.
yes,
You know, it is weird, but, you know, honestly, conversations are not won by the person who yells the loudest at the other one. I mean, I know it's crazy, but it's true.
Yep.
It's not the way it works.
although that's how the twins think the game Jinx works.
Well, that's
Well,
the
they'll
way
be
a
like,
lot of other
Jinx,
things.
Jinx, Jinx, you owe me a Coke, you owe me a Coke, you owe me a Coke. And then whichever one of them yells the loudest, they'll be like, I won. And then Julia's older than them. She steps in and she's like, okay, you don't win this by yelling louder. You win it by whoever gets it on time, and then whoever takes a breath first and has to stop and then wins.
Yeah, they also like to do the this is mine and end of discussion, end of argument. Yeah, argument's over. It's like, that sounds familiar though. You know,
Yeah.
people like to say the argument's over
It's
when it's not over.
It's never over until it's actually resolved.
Yeah, if you quit before it's resolved, you just quit. You didn't finish it.
And the problem with arguments on a nation level is that they have to be resolved on a person by person basis,
Individual level,
over and over and over and
generation
and
after
over
generation
and
after
over
generation
and
after
over
generation.
and over
Yep.
between all
Everybody.
the people.
Yeah.
It's
Is-
great.
Yeah,
It's
isn't a
great.
democratic society great where we get to argue that? You know, when it was the king, the king really did just say, "Hey, argument's over," and everybody just had to, suffer with that. So, they didn't get to
Honestly,
discuss it.
I would prefer the discussion, as frustrating as it is sometimes, to someone just being like, nope, you're never talking about this again.
Yeah, that's not much fun.
But see, here's the thing, Americans. If we don't actually use the discussion to actually resolve our problems, then at some point, somebody is going to come
Yeah,
in and be like,
well-
you're never talking about this again. Or
Yeah.
you're dead.
Democracy always has devolved into a dictatorship. So we have to keep fighting for that right to vote and talk and discuss and persuade and even argue about these things, or else eventually we'll wind up with no ability to do those things.
As the Beastie Boys said, you gotta fight for your right to party.
Which party would that be?
All of them.
That's probably like the actual only thing he knows at all about the Beastie Boys. we had to look it up one time because somebody
Yeah.
mentioned it in a show, and he's like, What is that?
Which
So
I'd heard that song before. I know lots of songs.
he does.
I just don't know who they're by.
He knows a lot more songs than I do. He
Mm-hmm.
listens to like anything that comes out, just about.
Yeah.
And,
I listen to all the things.
my brain would explode. All right, so keep arguing, keep discussing, keep persuading,
And more importantly, keep listening.
and keep praying.
Yes. Probably
'Cause
most important of
that's
all.
what our prayer videos are
Mhm.
all about. Is
Yeah.
pray like the people in the Bible did, because God does have all the
Mm-hmm.
answers. He does understand everything. He does know it all, unlike the rest of us.
And this being a bit more of a hot topic, in-depth issue, we went a little bit longer. Sue us.
Yeah, we don't sue us. We can't afford lawyers.
I work at Taco
And
Bell.
we-
I have money now.
Not much money, mind you, but he
No.
does have rice and beans.
Yeah, I do.
So,
I'm going to make some great food out of that.
all right. Well, hope that you've learned something about praying for our leaders, praying for ourselves for wisdom, and trying to understand others, but the blessings that come from wisdom and
Yes.
understanding as well. And if not, well, I'm sorry you wasted your time.
Yeah. Personally, for me, it was an interesting, mostly one-sided conversation.
Yeah, somebody did do a lot more of the talking in this one. Someone who seems to be not interested in politics at all talked an awful lot.
I'm not interested in politics, but people being dumb is very important to me.
Wait, it's important to you for people to be dumb?
Oh, no, people being dumb is important in me in that I would like them to not.
Oh, okay.
That said,
See, I didn't understand what he was saying there. I had to ask that clarifying
yeah,
question.
that
See,
said,
that's the way that works.
people being dumb is also very important to me because Florida Man is a whole thing.
Yeah, and it can be entertaining when people are dumb.
As long as they're not
Like-
dumb to me.
Like the secretary that went and she ran out of typing paper and she needed some more and she was down to her last sheet, and so the other secretary said, "We'll just use the copy paper." So she went and took her last piece of typing paper to the copier and made 5 copies. So she'd have 5 more pieces of typing paper. I know none of you have ever done anything as dumb as that, right?
We all have our dumb moments. Just try to move
I know
past them.
somebody who did that when they were like in traffic the other day. Did something dumb in traffic. Driving.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I ran over this person and they're dead now. No.
That is not. Don't say things like that on a YouTube video. Somebody will
No.
have you arrested. He did bump into a car because he forgot that the brake has to be pushed
Yeah.
and like you have to keep.
I had
holding it.
paper directions, so I looked down at my directions.
He was
and
he was
my
stopped,
brain was yeah.
and
Yeah.
so he looked at the directions and.
And then my brain was like, "You're in park. You can move your foot off the brake." So I did.
But
And
he
then-
wasn't in park.
It wasn't bad at all. Like under 5 miles an hour.
It'll be $2,000.
Oh yeah. Bye.
So now you don't have any money from Taco Bell.
Be a smart person, unlike me.